Pillay says the move was made during an emergency session addressing this crisis.
Just stepped out of the session of the Human Rights Council, where a historic resolution was adopted without a vote. That means unanimously. The resolution condemns the violence, asks for a cessation, sets up an investigation committee, a commission, and directs me to assist with that, and has referred the matter to the UN General Assembly under a provision where the UN General Assembly can suspend a member who is grossly violating international humanitarian and human rights law.
Nick Spicer is now live in Geneva to update us on this one. A resolution which condemns, Nick. I guess in the end there's perhaps not a lot more this council could actually come up with.
Well, it has come up with a legal web that we'll be paying attention to in the weeks and months to come, which is the creation of an international investigation into what's happening in Libya now. And what that means is that the international community has decided here today to start gathering evidence that would go towards a possible prosecution of the people who are undertaking what Mrs. Pillay early in the day called possible crimes against humanity in Libya. So, of course, there was a lot of talking, a lot of rhetoric here in Geneva today, but there was also a decision that may be critical in the future when it comes to possibly prosecuting the people who are responsible for the violence.
Libya is actually on the Human Rights Council, isn't it? It's been there for some time.
Yeah, you're right. Well, for actually not too long, but it was a surprise because Libya, the seat was empty for Libya for most of the day, and then a diplomat turned up saying, "We are no longer representing the Libyan government, we're representing the Libyan people. We're with the revolution." This caused much surprise, applause. There was a reading of a passage of the Quran which explains when it is okay for the faithful to stand up against their rulers. It was really an historic occasion for many of the people here who had never seen anything like this. These are all professional diplomats, of course. The diplomat standing up and saying, "I no longer represent my government, but I represent the people." So surprise and emotion, but not enough to stop the international community gathered here in Geneva from condemning Libya and from taking steps that could allow possible prosecution of Libyan leaders in the future.
Nick Spicer at the Human Rights Council in Geneva, thank you. I want to look at other protests around the region. It's not just Libya, of course. This Friday has been filled with protests in the Middle East. Iraq, where protests against corruption, a lack of basic services turned deadly. At least 2 people were killed in the northern city of Hawija. And protesters in Baghdad also squared off against riot police. Tarek Bazley with more on all that.
The spirit of protest very much alive in Iraq. Despite the capital and virtual security lockdown, thousands took to the streets. Their day of rage inspired by recent events in North Africa.
Our demands is the following. First, prevent corruption by making laws to prevent that and apply it correctly for the favourite of the Iraqi people.
Soldiers searched protesters trying to enter Liberation Square. They barricaded a bridge leading to the city's so-called Green Zone government area. At one point, protesters threw stones at riot police, who forced them back against the wall. In the southern city Basra, around 3,000 also took to the streets to protest against corruption and a lack of basic services. Concrete slabs surrounding the Basra government building were knocked over. Clashes too with riot police in Mosul, where provincial government offices were set on fire. 8 years after the US-led invasion and the fall of Saddam Hussein, there's clear anger on the streets. Development has been slow to come to the country, and after recent events in the region, there are fears that anger could drive a broader call for change. Tarek Bazley, AlJazeera.
Keep moving around the region. Thousands of protesters on the streets of Jordan on Friday demanding political and economic reform. Around 5,000 people are holding a rally in Amman amid a strong police presence. They're calling for constitutional changes, in particular a limit on the powers of the monarch, King Abdullah. Government also recently introduced financial and political concessions to prevent a spillover of anti-government protests in neighbouring countries. In Bahrain, tens of thousands of people gathered at Manama's Pearl Roundabout after Friday prayers. They carried flags, they chanted slogans calling for unity between Sunni and Shia. They also demanded King Hamad and his government step down. Friday's been declared a national day of mourning a week after 7 people were killed in clashes with security forces. And in Tunisia, thousands also filled the streets of central Tunis in a day of rage against Muammar Gaddafi and his crackdown on Libyans. They also called for the resignation of former loyalists from Tunisia's interim government, including the caretaker Prime Minister Mohamed Ghannouchi. Grab a break on Al Jazeera. When we come back, the mass exodus live to Malta as thousands of Libyans and foreigners try to escape the violence.
Welcome back to your weather forecast. We are first going to start with Japan. They have had a nice little break over the last couple of days, but more rain is going to be coming into their forecast. As you can see here, this right here is an area of high pressure. That means all the clouds have dissipated, but it's been bringing a little bit of cooler air into the forecast. Now over towards the west, some snow, some rain, and normally this would be bad news, but for China, this is actually very good news over the next couple of days. They have seen some incredible drought conditions over the last weeks and months. So we're going to be getting rain, we're going to be getting snow. The snow will actually stay until the spring, melt, and help those farmers in need. A little bit further down towards the south, we are going to be seeing some cloudy conditions. This really hasn't changed much over the last couple of days, and it's not going to change much as we go into Sunday. You notice very cloudy conditions all the way to Taipei. Temperatures will stay in the mid to low 20s. As you can see, down towards Manila, though, it's going to be about 29 to about 30 degrees. The heat index will be a little bit higher than that. But down towards Australia, that's where the big news is right now. We're looking at some very wet conditions up here towards the north. Adelaide, 38 degrees. As we go into the next day, 40 degrees. That means all along the Great Bight right here, we're looking at extreme fire dangers for them.
Unpopular with some at home, untested overseas. The first year has not been easy for David Cameron and his coalition government. In conjunction with U2, Al Jazeera asks your questions to the British Prime Minister. World View, an interview with David Cameron at this time on Al Jazeera.
We do accept that there was very bad mistakes made in our banking area.
Behind the headlines,
most South Koreans are not interested in reunification.
Is the inside story at this time on Al Jazeera.
Top story on Al Jazeera, it is of course Libya. Fast-moving events there. Muammar Gaddafi in the last 2 hours giving a surprise address in Tripoli's Green Square following another day of violence across the country. There have been clashes in several areas across the capital. Forces loyal to the leader have opened fire to disperse the crowds. Thousands more have rallied in cities across the east. Well, this uprising in Libya has triggered a refugee crisis, of course. Tens of thousands of people fleeing the country. Many are heading to Malta, and that is where we find Cal Perry for an update. Cal.
Kamal, we're talking about 4 boats that are going to be headed here in the next 3 to 4 hours. First, the American flotilla, which is comprised of 2 boats carrying roughly 300 people. Just over half of those are Americans. The Chinese have also laid on a boat to bring back 2,000, they're saying, workers out of Libya. And we also understand, of course, that there's a British frigate that will be bringing people out of Benghazi, 207 people on that ship. Just to give you an idea, I want to show you, Kamal, the media attention that this is drawing here in Malta. It's also important to mention that a lot of these people on these boats are reportedly sick, especially the Americans. They were stuck in the port in Tripoli for 48 hours. The seas are incredibly rough, so the hospitals here have gone on alert to try to treat people as soon as they reach the island.
And how well equipped is the island to deal with all of this, Cal? Big numbers coming in.
Yeah, very big numbers indeed. We understand that the hospital says they are ready for the influx that is going to be coming here in the next 3 to 4 hours. We've been speaking to security advisors at the airport. There are special forces troops all over the airport here in Malta. There are security advisors blanketing the airport. We asked the question, compared to the war in Lebanon in 2006, where, of course, Cyprus was used as really a base. We said, how does this compare to that? They said, actually, Malta is much, much, much better prepared for the influx of expatriates that are going to be coming here in the next 3 to 4 hours.
And any thoughts, any ideas from anyone about how long all this might take to process and get moving again?
Well, it's unclear. Certainly for the expatriates, it's going to probably happen pretty quickly. I can tell you the hotel that we are staying in is basically booting us out. They're expecting a huge influx of people to come in. So pretty much every hotel room in Malta at this point is booked. For the expatriates coming in, the Americans, the Europeans, they should pass through customs fairly quickly with their passports. So obviously, the locals having a very difficult time getting out of Libya. That's a growing concern. Out at the airport, you can see they put up barbed wire. A tent city is slowly coming up, preparing perhaps for an influx.
Oh, Cal, just lost you at the end there. Cal Perry, live from Malta. Thank you for that. So as we talk about mass evacuations, a group of UN workers evacuated from Tripoli has arrived at a military airport outside Rome. They include Italians and other European Union citizens, flown back on 2 Italian military transport planes mobilised by the country's Foreign Ministry Emergency Unit. Relief at Athens airport. Greek nationals have been safely airlifted home from Tripoli. Most described scenes of chaos in the Libyan capital. One said he witnessed what he called 4 cold-blooded executions in the street. And Beijing's sent a missile frigate to escort ships carrying Chinese evacuated from Libya. The frigate's been diverted from anti-piracy duties in the Gulf of Aden. And 2 commercial planes sent by the Chinese government have arrived back in Beijing as well, carrying more than 250 people. More than 30,000 Chinese were believed to be working in Libya when fighting broke out. Some 12,000 have since left. Tariq Youssef still with me in the studio. He's a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute in Washington. What's your feeling now, 2 hours now since we heard Muammar Gaddafi speak? You had hesitation in your voice earlier.
Yeah.
What are you thinking now?
I'm thinking now that it's been a week since these protests have started. Perhaps we had built so much hope that this would come to an end sooner than it might. It took about a month in Tunis, without any brutality, without any bloodshed, or at least with limited. Gaddafi has threatened a couple of days ago outright, all-out battle against all of his enemies. And today he's invited all his supporters in the Green Square to essentially be armed or be prepared to be armed in case that final battle that he promised will take place.
So perhaps we've all gotten, forgive this phrase, a little bit excited about it all because